This is the Lydian Spin with Lydia Lunch and Tim Dahl. We are replaying a podcast we did a short while ago with the recently deceased Wayne Kramer of the MC5. And if you don't know your rock history, you should look them up. Very politically motivated, hard rocking, early, almost punk garage, just brutal rock and very important in the scheme of things. They were the only band to play the Democratic Convention during the worst, another one of the worst times in history during the Vietnam War. And Josephus and the George Jonestown Massacre has done a few tribute albums in the past, but just in November released a tribute to the MC5 with a lot of different people on it. Myself, J.G. Thurwell, Eugene Robinson, Alice Cooper, Sherry Curry. And the proceeds will benefit a charity that Wayne Kramer had started called Jail Guitar Doors, which brought guitars to prisoners, because at least if you have something to look forward to with the amount of incarceration in this country, any little bit helps. And this album is pretty kick-ass, called Just Call Me Animal.
It was another loss, but Wayne was really kind of an incredible person, and not just musically and artistically, but actually socially, morally, and he contributed and he gave back. And real quickly, the thing that really struck me with this interview is not everyone in prison is going to leave, is going to become a musician, but these people, most of them, never experienced the idea of making a design, working with someone else, even if you don't like the person, and realizing that design. The tools were much greater than what it was on its surface, and it was noble and pretty powerful. Well, he lived his best life.
He did, and he was somebody that was incarcerated and understood exactly what that means. We all know prison, jail, incarceration sucks. I mean, fortunately, only about 6 million of us in America have experienced it, either personally or through members of our family. So for him to have been there, come out, he wrote a great book about his whole life experience, and then put something back to the people that, some of the people that really needed most. Just a great guy. And so we're very happy to replay this, the Lydian Spin with Lydia Lunch, Tim Dahl, and Wayne Kramer, a rock god. Good afternoon, Wayne Kramer. I'm Lydia Lunch. Welcome to the Lydian Spin. That's Tim Dahl, my co-host, and Simon Slater, the producer.
Hello, friends. Nice to see you all today. Happy to hear you.
We're speaking with the legendary, at least in some minds, Wayne Kramer from the MC5, extremely important political rabble rousers from the mid to late 60s. You were just a young upstart in the early MC5.
True.
And you're still a bit of an upstart.
Yeah, I don't think that part goes away.
Well, you look pretty busy. I mean, I'm looking for the people that can't see this and maybe won't see it. You're in your home studio and you have a lot of sound waves on, that are tracks. So you're doing something. You got your hands full, it looks like.
Yeah, it's important to stay busy, I think. Something about idle time being the devil's workshop.
I don't mind being in the devil's workshop as long as he's behind me where he belongs. All I'm saying. Look, the period that you came up in as a young teenager in Detroit was just so politically rabid, enticing, exciting, and ultimately, in my opinion, disappointing, because all of the fervor and the intelligence of people rebelling in the mid to late 60s, because the politics were very much like they are now, or very much like they always have been, full of fucking shit against the individual, war whores, etc. But it was it must have been such an exciting time, but you're just doing what came naturally.
Well, yeah, but you have to remember the context.
Tell us.
Me and the band and all our friends were part of a whole generation that disagreed with the direction the country was going in. We discussed it all the time, but we didn't have to discuss it. It was an agreement that we all shared. I mean, next to nobody took a contrarian view to anti-war, pro-civil rights, anti-imperialist, and anti-gravity.
It sounds like you've been very consistent in your stance, but now in America, we basically just left this nationalist, isolationist fascism to go back to this imperialistic global capitalism again. And yet we do want to take a, exhale a little bit, because that kind of just chaos of what was before is pretty insane. Yet it looks like more wars, basically. It looks like, where is this going to go? And so, I know you supported Bernie, and you've been consistent, going back to my original point, with where you stood with these things. Yet you're still going, because it seems like there's a battering ram to always be like, once you stand up for the people, they're like, nope, not fucking allowed. And you can, the artist can, anyone that's a public figure can, but the real powers that be, it seems like there's just obstruction every time you get close, or at least it seems like we get close.
Well, this is the nature of struggle. You fight and lose and fight and lose and fight and lose, and then you win one.
Right.
And then you go back and fight and lose and fight and lose. You have to, in my humble opinion, you have to pull back and see things in a larger scale. That things don't happen in weeks and months and even years. Things happen, over decades and over millennia. The kind of forces that we would like to see eliminated or reversed, they didn't get here overnight, and they're not going away overnight.
The thing is, I came up being just a little bit younger than you, out of the race riots of the late 60s, and out of that protest music. Even though I was a little too young, I understood the energy of it, and I understood what the race riots and war and Kent State and all that was. And it really inspired me to become a political artist, but who also likes to rock. How I deal with the hideous last 4 years that we've had, because to me, it is in some ways the same as it ever was. I mean, it is the patriarchy. It is capitalism. It is like the kings are ruling everything. It's like the individual has to fight. And how we win is there is a community of like-minded people. And through music and through art, at least it's not a utopia, but at least we have that community. And there are a lot of intelligent people that realize the world is fucking going in the wrong direction. It always has been. What are we going to fucking do about it? We can complain all we want. And ultimately, art and music as the salve to the universal wound is why we exist. And that's why we welcome you to this show, Wayne Kramer.
Well, thanks. Happy to be here.
Were you born or raised in the city of Detroit? Were you in the suburbs before? I mean, obviously you made your name kind of in Detroit, but white flight, Detroit was 2 million in the infrastructure for like a 2 million residents, like in the 60s. Now it's about 750,000, 800,000. I mean, just that city, just population. And of course, there's been some good things happening recently to try to ignite it again. But in general, it's the classic American Rust Belt story of a shrinking population, a shrinking economy. And what I'm getting at is, you're there in the free fall, in the beginning of that real free fall that actually happened. Were you like, I'm out of here? Because you don't live there now. Or what was your relationship with Detroit? That's why I'm asking. Were you born there?
I was born at Lincoln Hospital on West Grand Boulevard and was raised there, and grew up in the period after World War II where the 50s and the 60s, Detroit was a boom town.
Yep.
The auto industry was enjoying huge success, and
it was the richest city in America at one point at that period.
And it was the manufacturing center of the world. If we wanted it built, we could build it in Detroit. There was a great sense of unlimited possibilities, but not everyone shared in the prosperity of the auto industry. People of color didn't share in the economics. They didn't share in the political life in Detroit. They, were crossed out of any of the great benefits that all the white people were enjoying. And, you can only keep a boot on people's neck for so long, and they're gonna buck.
Well, actually, I have to butt in because you can only keep a boot on people's neck for so long. They've been keeping a boot on our fucking neck for fucking ever. So, I mean, when's that boot going to come off, honey, is what I'm saying. And, we got intelligent people like Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. It's not that there hasn't been intelligent minds politically complaining, artistically complaining, in every form of intellectual, artistic, from books and etc. And we'll get to your book in a minute. But it's like this boot has been on our neck. That is the individual that understands there is something beyond capitalism, beyond the monarchy, beyond these fucking false kings that are just ruining and running, or as I like to say, fucking the entire fucking planet. And the thing is, we're still alive, Wayne Kramer, because we still got work to do.
Well, we always will, because our vision is a utopian vision. It's an idealistic utopian time when, in the 60s, it wasn't clear to me that we were going to make it much further, that the chances of an accidental nuclear holocaust seemed to me that was what was going to happen.
Still could, actually.
But if we could make it another 20 years, we'd go on to this beautiful creative existence. Well, we're 50 years down the road now, and we haven't exactly hit that beautiful creative existence.
Well, going back to your Detroit thing, and this is the optimistic angle, even if you were there during the spark of the white flight downfall and all that stuff. But you have Hitsville. I don't know what you think about Motown, but the black music there, just the music culture in general, and it's still celebrated to this day, was tremendous. Was that something that inspired you, or were you a contrarian?
I want to jump in to say that not only was he part of the musical revolution, but that he continued to work with people like Rage Against the Machine, which is so important, that keeping consistent, because the problem doesn't go away. Okay, please.
Well, yeah, Detroit was a little bit unique in we had this huge influx of workers after World War II and after Korea that came up to Detroit for the good union jobs. And they brought their culture with them. So Detroit radio was fantastic by any measure because of the breadth of the expression available. You could hear, Polish music, or you could hear white Southern music, or you could hear gut bucket rhythm and blues from the Deep South. And then popular radio, the pop stations played great stuff. The only criteria was, is it a hit? Is it that good that people will love it unanimously? Music hadn't become balkanized yet.
Right.
Well, and what's bizarre about like 67, 68 is the hits of that time. Can you imagine things like Ball of Confusion, White Rabbit? Two different extremes. Okay, one talking actually about we are fucked, and the other talking about we need to get fucked up because this is just ridiculous. The diversity of what was considered musical mainstream and on the radio at that time, and I relate to it because as somebody that came also from the Rust Belt, Rochester, the radio was saving me at that point.
Yeah, it was ubiquitous. All those cars that Detroit made had radios in them that we all listened to. The minute you get in the car, the first thing you do is get your settings, get your stations, argue with your mom and dad about what station you're going to listen to.
Okay, MC Vibe, though, they came up with it was a musical bombast as both, artistic expression, but as protest in a sense. And what was the inspiration beyond that? And I know that a lot of music at that time was it seemed as if it was coming out of nowhere. This was a unique form of expression because it was a very specific changing of all orders and hopeful of the next possibilities. But who were your influences? Because I can't really figure out who influenced you since you started at such an early time in the 60s with such outrageously bombastic music.
Well, it seemed to me there were certain musics that had characteristics that I gravitated to. Rhythm and blues had it. The music of James Brown had it. The music of the Black Church had it. You know, obscure R&B records from the South had it. And some of the new bands from England had it. Then there was a whole lot of other music, you know, Bobby Vinton and all that stuff that I just didn't have any use for. And it seemed to me that the thing that tied it all together was the level of energy that was put into the music, in the creation and performance of the music, a degree of commitment and passion that was physical and not so intellectual, but more visceral. So I certainly found it in the music of Little Richard and Chuck Berry. And that kind of got me started. That was the kind of music, you know, and I love the sound of the electric guitar. You know, guitars had been around for a while, but this new electric guitar had a different expression that was really in sync with the early 60s and this emerging technology.
What was your first guitar, electric guitar? And also, I really like what you said, that it was visceral, it was physical, because I always say that if it's not burning you, if music is not burning or art is not burning in your blood, just keep it in your garage. If it's burning, you have to create it. You have to do it. That's where great art comes from. And then we could just go sideline and go, as Federico Garcia Lorca said, duende, which is the art that actually raises the hair on the back of your neck, which great music does. If it burns in your blood, it's going to also relate to other people whose blood is burning. But the question was, what was your first guitar?
It was a silver tone. We bought it from Sears. It had 2 pickups. It was actually a pretty cool little guitar. I forget the model number. You know, America was, at least Detroit, you know, people had good jobs and they could afford electric guitars for their teenage boys. And there were bands all over my neighborhood. I mean, on a Saturday, you could ride your bike and you'd hear bands practicing in garages and in basements, you know, and they were all over town. You know, in my part of town, they existed. They were on the east side of Detroit. They were out in the northwest, and that idea of energy, we zeroed in on it, and we started to refer to the kind of music that we played as high energy, and then John Sinclair, my dear friend and mentor and teacher, turned me on to the free jazz movement.
It's funny because I know Eric Gardner, who you hire. I was actually in the same high school band with him. We're old friends, and he because I used to play with Archie Shepp, and he said when he was on the road, he goes, Wayne listens to Archie Shepp all the time. You know, the Fire music, and that was kind of the same energy that you guys were tapping into at that same time, even though you were coming from a very different place. And
well, we were coming from the perspective of rock musicians, and they were coming from the perspective of being bebop jazz musicians. Were certainly worked at a more accomplished level. They understood more about music. Their technical ability was superior, but still, we all shared this need for a new music, a music that expressed the frustration.
Which I'm so glad that you're saying this, because it's the intellectual risk taking of, say, Charlie Parker or Coltrane, Archie Shepp, or the risk taking of a band like yours, as opposed to a lot of popular punk now, which is basically the template, but more refined and less risk taking, or neo-bop players who are just know the stuff inside and out, but it doesn't sound like they're about to fall on their fucking face at any given moment. There is no risk.
They're not.
Yeah, exactly.
They're reproducing something that they've studied in an academic kind of way. You know, the free jazz guys, not unlike the MC5, endured heaps of scorn. The jazz world, you know, was as racist and as foul in its criticism of those musicians as anything that any punk rock band ever had.
No, absolutely.
There's so much that you have done, in spite of the fact that for a while you were not only imprisoned, were a fucked up junkie. Look, it happens. But you came back, you came out, you came in, you came out. I'm very impressed with your Jail Guitar Doors. And it goes back to what I was saying before about this compilation that Joey Killingsworth put together, a tribute to the MC5, but whose really the benefits go to the charity which you started a while back. And it's interesting because we interviewed Adele Bertay, who I've known for 40 years, and she said she did some workshops with you. Tell us a little bit about that, because you were in prison. We can go there or not, but you realized that music as the universal salve to the psychic wounds, you somehow figured out a way that you needed to go teach workshops and bring guitars to people in prison. Can you talk a little bit about that, Wayne?
Sure, happy to. I watched after I was released as prison populations doubled, tripled, quadrupled, and kept waiting for some conscious politician to say, hey, something's going wrong here. And they never did. And it pissed me off to the point that I had to take some ethical action. I had to do something. That's how I deal with my own cynicism and my own apathy. I've seen the enemy. It's not the capitalist. It's not Donald Trump. It's Wayne Kramer, who wants to just sit on his couch and complain.
Well, you haven't really
shit.
done that, so carry on.
Well, I mean, it's that or slash my wrist.
There's so many better wrists to slash than your own, honey. Just let me know and I'll go there with you. Go ahead.
Thanks. You're very kind. So, you know, what could I do? Well, it was important for me to play music when I was in prison and to study and to provide some distraction for my fellow prisoners. And we had a number of bands and we performed regularly, and it was a way to be part of the community.
What years were those?
75 to 78. And so I thought, okay, maybe I could play concerts in prisons. Maybe that would help. I always appreciated it when people came in from the outside and put on a show for us. And one of the concerts I put on was at Sing Sing in New York, an infamous maximum security facility. And Billy Bragg came with me, and he had told me that he had launched an independent initiative in England, and he called it Jail Guitar Doors, named after the Clash song about my bad behavior. And the more we talked about it, he talked about providing instruments that prisoners could use as tools to help them change for the better. And I knew from my own experience that if we don't help people change for the better, life in prison itself will change you for the worse.
I just want to say this. You know, I started speaking about prison under Bill Clinton in my spoken word, and there were only 900,000 prisoners then. Now there's like 3.26 million. That's not counting the people that are on parole, all the families involved. This is millions and millions of people who are part of the prison industrial complex. A lot of them for petty drug charges. I know they're trying to change that right now. This is prisons for profit, and there used to, at one point, there was a thought of at least reparation in prison, teach people something. And it's just it is our gulag. So, and it's very important what you did. So you were in the prison system. Billy Bragg came in. You know how important it is to at least give somebody a bit of a lifesaver. And you start and help doing this Jail Guitar Doors. What happens with that? What do you do? What is it?
It's pretty simple. We find people that work in corrections that are willing to use music and art as a tool for changing people's behavior. And we provide them with instruments. We started with guitars, but we can generate some other instruments as well. And then we developed a program. There are songwriting workshops. They're run by professional musicians, professional songwriters, And what we try to do is share some information about a way to express complex and often painful feelings and memories in a new and positive way. Everyone has a story, and everyone's story matters. And people in prison really have stories, and they want their stories heard. They need to be heard. And we discovered that through the process of writing songs, we could get them to talk about all these uncomfortable things, and they would feel so much better afterwards that we started to see the efficacy and in the transformative power of creating art. That most people in prison never learned the secret of how to work, how to sit in one place and focus on one task to accomplish that task. And, not a job, not something that somebody's paying you for, but something that you have to do. So in our workshops, we have rules, and the rules are that prison politics stays out on the yard. We can talk about anyone and anything, but we must treat each other with dignity and respect. And there can be no gang affiliations, no racial distinctions, no sexual distinctions, no class distinctions. In our workshops, we're all artists. And the men and women and children we work with get to be what they are, which is natural
amazing.
And natural storytellers, because these are the stories that need to be heard, because people don't just out of nowhere end up in a situation that puts them in prison, in jail, on parole. First of all, the whole system is skewed against everybody. We know the injustice that goes on, but that you're extending that hand, that just, it really can make all the difference in a place that is basically a gulag that warehouses people, often for the most petty of infractions, and especially based on their race or their economic status. It's so important.
But going back to this point, Wayne, and I'm very curious. Did you find yourself in a situation where there was beef between people, where they didn't get along, and yet there you saw them working together as musicians, where that set of rules applied to something that actually
bridge the gap?
Happens every day in our workshops.
So important.
I've had it happen 100 times where a guy will tell me, that dude, I didn't like him. I'd see him on the yard. I don't like that guy. But then I worked on the song with him, and, he's all right. Something we try to talk about is that, if we're writing a song about children that day, the homie wants the same thing for his kids that the brother wants for his kids, that the Peckerwood wants for his kids. Everybody wants the same thing. And that really we're all the same. We're all in this together. And it's the prison authorities that exploit the differences to keep control.
Well, and
this
is a big problem in politics in general, is that they want to pit the lower class, the impoverished, the poor against each other so that they have better claim to everything else. Like, they want everybody, and basically everybody who is not them, which is the 1% rich octogenarian white men, everybody who is not that is basically on some other lower level. Then they want to take the people that have the least, because they allow them the least, to pit themselves against each other, which is really a big problem. Because actually, if all of us, that is the individuals that understand we have been fucked by the system, because the system is fucked, came together, there would be an overthrow. And trust me, I'm all for it.
95% of the people in America's prisons are going to come home someday, and they're going to need skills that prison doesn't teach you, to collaborate with other people, people that you might not choose to hang out with. Maybe they're not from your neighborhood. Maybe they speak slightly differently than you. But if you get a job, you're probably going to have to work with someone that you wouldn't normally hang out with. So these are real world skill sets that we're trying to share with people. And lately, in the last 5 years, we've sharpened our focus on young people. We've been working with the LA probation department in the camps and the halls. To their credit, they're dismantling, and they're going to try some new approaches. And I guess you could say we're working upstream to disrupt the cradle to prison pipeline. We work with young people who either their justice system involved, or maybe they're just neighborhood kids. It doesn't matter to us. My goal is to expose them to the possibilities that are out there for them. We live in the entertainment capital of the universe, and there's dozens and dozens of jobs that young people could take if they knew such a job existed and they could do it. So we call our youth program CAPO, Community Arts Programming and Outreach. And we're just building it now. We've got a great building on 3rd Street near Fairfax, which is in neutral gang territory. And we'll have a complete recording studio for them to work on their music and learn how to do that. But we'll also have a computer lab where they can learn film editing, they can learn how to shoot video, they can edit sound, they can edit picture, they can learn all those jobs.
And it's so important because not only learning skills, but these people have stories to tell. And again, the disenfranchisement, which is actually instigated from without, because if people realize we're all being victimized by a failed system that continues to profit the 1% at the expense of everybody else, let's pray for a better tomorrow, because it has to happen. I don't have much faith. Democrats are much different than Republicans. They're a little bit better, and at least we do have some voices of reason in there. People have got to come together. It's what you've been saying all along. It's like the enemy is not who lives next to you, who's in the same condition and position that you are. This is something that actually the U.S. government has always been instigating. The enemy are those that are above us, shitting on us, all of us.
So Wayne, what I'm gathering here, at least especially with this setup, you're talking about neutral gang zone, you have an ability for logistics. So logistically, how did you manage to, because maybe I don't know the prison culture well enough, but it seems like there's a lot of obstruction. How do you create in a prison where basically these are cages provided to give people who with no rights and contain them? How do you create an environment in a prison where instruments are available, where you have the prison guards, the system allowing? Because from the outside, I'm thinking, at least what I know, it's like people aren't allowed to do basically anything.
Incredible job, Wayne. I think Tim's just asking, how did all of this come about? Because you managed to fucking do it, and it's very important.
Well, I know how the system works. I mean,
having been inside it,
I know it from the inside out. And so I know what dealing with prison wardens involves. And, it takes a fair amount of tenacity. We were told no a great deal in the early years. People wouldn't take my calls. They wouldn't take meetings with us. But now we've been doing this for 12 years. Our instruments and programs are in over 160 American prisons. We get mail every week that says, hey, we heard about your program. We used to have a music program, but we'd like to get a new one. Could you help us? And the word's out now. And so we're just trying to build on that. If I just finish one last point about young people, is some of them have done bad things, but they're still children. Their brains are still moldable. They're still plastic. And if we can change their direction by 1 degree, we may be able to avoid spending the bulk of their adult life in the California Department of Corrections. Just interest them in something besides banging and the hood, and they got a shot. I mean, I wish I wrote half the stuff these guys write. Brilliant stuff.
So let me go back a little bit in time again, because I'm thinking about the counterculture movement, and you think of late 60s, people think of like San Francisco, they think of the freaks in New York. There you were seminal 1968 Chicago Democratic Convention. I mean, it's been covered a few times, but can you reflect on that a little bit more? I mean, you guys, Detroit, Rust Belt rock, you show up to Chicago. I always view that as blue collar Democrats fighting maybe more privileged Democrats. I don't know, but it was like a civil war, basically.
I have to cut in, Tim. Look, we know what happened in history at that period. There were any number of intellectual artists, musicians, writers, poets who were complaining about the situation that was. What I want to know is this: how the fuck did you feel January 6th?
In my wildest fantasies, in the 60s, the best I could come up with is we would die in a shootout with the police. The Black Panthers were being subject to death squads across the country. And
Yep.
I figured since we were aligned with them and we took a militant stance, we were armed, that's probably what would happen to us. Never in a million years did I fantasize that we would attack the capital of the United States of America and try to disrupt Congress. I mean, that.
What's your take on who was disrupting that? Because this is interesting. Because look, you can't paint everyone with the same brush stroke, no matter what the situation is, because there are all kinds of different people there. What do you think there was a unified point to that nonsense?
Of course.
And again, how do we get to this point?
Of course, and the unified point was Donald Trump. I mean,
how the hell is what I have to shout.
He is clearly the most corrupt public official in American history.
What one of my questions was, why didn't one fucking person stand up and just ask from his so-called followers, what exactly has he done for you? Nobody asked that. And also, why didn't somebody ask him exactly? Because he couldn't answer this question because he's a fucking idiot. What is socialism that you fear? You think he could answer that question, Wayne? I don't.
No, they don't know what socialism is. Here's the thing. What he provided them was he never judged them. He provided
them the possibility to be a fucking asshole and get away with it.
Wayne, I think he did judge them, actually. He just tricked them into thinking that he wasn't judging them.
He wouldn't let any of those fucking people on any one of his fucking properties. This is what's so amazing about his fucking Barnum and Bailey possibility is that everything he bullshitted and still gathering money from people, and now they're finally turning against him. It's like, look, it's no different than a religious cult. People want something bigger.
You're right. It's a cult. It's absolutely a cult.
You leave jail, which is already an impressive feat. Between friends of mine who've been to jail or who've had drug problems, whatever, the stats aren't very good. And the few ones that I know that who've somehow managed to find their peace and solutions to whatever their own demons are, in a weird way, they come out with some pretty incredible skills of survival and whatever it is. You managed to do that. And I'm sure, whatever, we all have bumps in the road, but you managed to do that. You have a whole life in front of you. And what you've done since, not just the political activism,
not just the music, not just the activism music, and all that. Yes,
exactly. You're also doing film score. I mean, you're very busy and you're very productive. Do you have peace with where you've arrived? Are you happy with where you've arrived?
In a general sense, but that is no. I'm not. I'm hardly at peace.
Honey, you don't know how fucking cranky I was before this conversation. It wasn't because you. I was happy to talk to you. I am fucking Frankenstein right now. Even though things seem to have gotten a bit better, it's like, seem to have gotten a bit better. Carry on, just saying.
When I saw that you did the Eastbound and Down, which I actually thought was a pretty great show, did you get that through Will Ferrell because of Talladega Nights? Is that how you got that gig?
It was really through Adam. Will's writing partner and his director, Adam McKay. He asked me to provide some music for Talladega Nights. They had another composer on the film, but he couldn't rock. He was good with the orchestra, but his guitar rock sounded like bad movie rock.
Well, that's the thing, because because of Eric Gardner, who Tom Morello would bring him in to do these like action sequence, heavy metal, hard rock, because there is that point, maybe the new generation, like, we don't want the banal fake version of this. We might as well go to the real guys.
Authentic
Duh.
shit,
But maybe is that the erosion of the unions and synthesizers? Or is it just people just it didn't dawn on them to bring in the real deal before? I don't know.
I don't know. I know they were struggling with the score. My dear friend, dearly departed Hal Wilner, was the music supervisor on the.
Okay.
And he said, well, listen, you want aggressive guitar rock? Why don't you call Wayne Kramer? He lives right here.
Right.
And McKay said, all right, great, call him. So I went over and, I identified with Adam right away, and we began a great friendship that continues to this day. He's still one of my best friends. And, there are real music fans that are making movies now. And, on occasion, guys like me get a shot.
You know what? You stay alive long enough, they have to come eventually and at least suck your fucking bootstrap for a minute or motherfucking two. What I want to ask this, going back in time just for a minute. You're in the Detroit scene. What was the best or most interesting band you played with back in the day, 67, 68, 69?
The orchestra probably was
amazing.
My league leader. I mean, we brought them to Detroit and they opened for the MC5 a number of
incredible
and
unbelievable.
But let me tell you, it could have gone either way.
I can imagine
the kids knew that the MC5 at the end of their set would play this, didn't have a beat and didn't have a key and didn't have a chorus and a bridge. There was some other kind of music.
Yep.
But, that's where Sun Ra starts. And the first night when all those black people were on stage and they started all that, the Detroit Greasers, for a minute there, it was like, I don't know, is this cool or not? And then finally, I think they connected that, that's what we did. And so they saw the connective tissue. And of course, Sun Ra became a big hit in the rock world in Detroit.
Ultimately, yes.
By the way, Wayne, you just said connective tissue. That's a phrase we use a lot. That's a phrase we use a lot on this podcast because there's so many, we've done over, by the time you air it soon, 90 episodes, and not everybody knows who everybody is, but the people we bring on, we want to expose to people that for some reason should know that there are these still unique individuals in all formats of creation that somehow should be related and should be related to. And when you say something like this about the greasers who are coming to see the MC5, might not have got really how you're exposing them to orchestra, but you had to frickin' do it. That's important shit. Because it doesn't matter whether they get it or not. Whoever gets it, gets it. And you know what? That's a change in their life. I had a concept called No Wave Out, and I wanted to do like No Wave, Out Jazz, and Last Poets. I didn't even know if they were alive. I randomly, out of the blue, met somebody who said, I know Umar bin Hassan. The biggest benefit of my existence was recording and performing with Umar bin Hassan of Last Poets and Tim Dahl and Weasel Walter. And it's the same as like kind of bringing orchestra. And the biggest disappointment in my life is that we're not playing every fucking night for free with me and Umar going between this is madness and my own madness. You know what I'm saying? This is important shit. The exposure to other dimensions that still somehow relate on an emotional, esoteric, intellectual, artistic level. God damn, I'm going to kiss myself after that little diatribe.
Hear, hear.
Well, so Wayne, I mean, I've seen it with touring with Lydia, and it's interesting when you have your own little niche, your own fan base, and when they can open up to what you're exposing them to, that's the ultimate respect. I mean, I've also heard the opposite on tours where bands, maybe a bigger band, will bring in something they really love, and those bands get booed off the stage, but somehow you pulled it off. I mean,
well, also what's interesting is, look, hard rock and orchestra, again, it's on an emotional intensity level. no wave to anything else. It stands on its own. When you bring other things in because you need to expose people. This is important. This is the connective tissue. Mr. Wayne motherfucking Kramer. That's right. Still going strong after all these years. Said, thank you very much, my friend. I'll watch you right now. I'll send you the track because you haven't heard it.
When you really started opening up to free jazz or just the cutting edge of jazz, were there any like concerts on those kind of like virgin breaking periods of just your brain expanding into this language that to this day you can comment on that blew your mind?
Blew your mind. Blew your mind.
Oh yeah, there's a jazz group in Detroit that we all lived in the same neighborhood, the same ghetto around Wayne State University, and we all had the same girlfriends and boyfriends. We smoked the same weed, and we all listened to the same music. And I became very close friends with many of the free jazz musicians in Detroit, and they were called the Contemporary Jazz Quintet. It was led by Kenny Cox and Dr. Charles Moore. And they had an organization called Strata, and they were a full service, record label, concert venue, music publishing, mentoring, and they had a facility. And they would bring in, in those days, they would bring in Herbie Hancock,
right,
or
whoever,
Jackie McLean, and
yep,
and then of course the orchestra played regularly in Detroit, and those gigs were seminal experiences. To see musicians of that caliber working together on such an intuitive level, such that the feeling preceded intelligence. And just
do you know the Yusef Lateef album that he only deals with just Detroit musicians? It was something what was it called? Like in the early 70s, because that's where he's from originally.
Detroit.
Yeah, Yusef's Detroit. Duh. Right, exactly.
In fact, we covered 12th and Elliott, that tune on there.
I know it. I'm
going to interject by saying one of my favorite sandwiches was performing at UCLA between John Sinclair, you know him well, and Cecil Taylor. And I'm doing a war fucking manifesto. And I'm like, oh my God, this is a grand sandwich. Because I feel like as if I was some kind of connective tissue, actually, between the weirdness of both of them.
There was another artist in Detroit. He's also dearly departed now. His name was Lyman Woodard. And Lyman was a jazz pianist and featured the Hammond organ. He called his group the Lyman Woodard Organization. And Lyman, he also worked, like he was Martha Reeves' musical director, and he worked at Motown. But when he led his own groups, it was often a trio with a wonderful drummer and singer named Melvin Davis, who was my partner for years after the MC5, and Dennis Coffey, great Detroit rhythm and blues guitar player. And Lyman's gigs, Lyman was like my idea of a professional musician. Lyman would book 3 nights a week in a club for like 2 years. And you'd know every Thursday, Friday, and Saturday night.
I know the deal.
Lyman's gig.
If only at this point we could do that.
And people used to dance, and it was, always.
Oh, it sounds so great.
In the heart of the.
I gotta ask you, Wayne. Are you a dancer? Or are you a prancer? What are you?
I'm an excellent dancer.
I'm just saying this, Wayne Kramer. My hips are ready to shake all around you, baby. I don't care what you want to push on that jukebox. I'm here to take you onto the dance floor or not. Actually, I wouldn't mind just having you watch me dance. How about that, Big Daddy? No, I don't want to call. Hey,
she's telling the truth. She's telling the truth.
Oh, Tim has seen it many times. I'll dance by myself. Yes. I don't give a shit because you know what? The rhythm that I dance to has got nothing to do with anything. You think orchestra is out there playing? Albert Island was out there. Honey, I got rhythm. I'm from the Rust Belt, just like you. Detroit, Rochester, the Riots, all of that.
You got to have the rock, but you got to have the roll.
Honey,
Now we're talking.
don't talk
Now we're
about my
talking.
don't talk about my goddamn rules, honey. You're sitting on
Whoa.
yours. That's all I'm saying. I wouldn't mind rubbing my roll against your rock any day. And
Look
by the way, I already did. I'm sending you that track.
Oh, my
I'm just
God.
saying, this is the Lydia Spin with Lydia at Lunch, Tim Dahl, legendary.
Wow.
Wayne Kramer, not going anywhere soon, doing everything still in his power to spread the fucking gospel that through art, through music, through literature, through meaning, emotion, through just intention, we come together in some kind of connective tissue to make at least our world, not the whole world, I wish we were bigger, a better place to fucking be.
You know, with art, you know, art tells us the stories of who we are and of the times that we live through, and makes us understand or helps us realize that we're not alone.
Exactly. That's the whole point. Nobody is alone in all of this. Exactly. Wayne Kramer, thank you so much.
Well, it's been an
my
honor,
friend.
Wayne.
Absolutely
Nice to meet you virtually.
Thank you guys for giving me the opportunity to blab.